thanks, Darren, for being here with me today. Looking forward to getting into some interesting topics, AI, process thought, but also some interesting sciency material that you've weaved into your own scholarship. For our viewers who are perhaps not familiar with you, want to give a little bit of introduction to yourself, some of your work, and yeah, why these topics are of interest.
Sure. Yes, so I've been interested in process philosophy, theology, going back at least to sort of my master's, I don't know, around, early 20s. And that's sort of what eventually led me to go to Claremont to CGU. And I focused heavily on process thought while I was there, mainly in terms of like interreligious dialogue, dealing with, religious pluralism. And those topics were primary at that time. And then after I ended up teaching, going to San Diego State and teaching there for many years, and then over at University of San Diego. So primarily been teaching for the last 15 years and then publishing here and there, but more focused on the teaching side of things. So that's a little bit of the background.
Yeah, and what on kind of a personal level drew you to some of the process material? Why of all the things one can sort of go down the rabbit hole with academically, intellectually, spiritually, what was the draw for this material?
So it's sort of an interesting way it all started. A bookstore, right? Back when they had those.
Right.
And I was in the philosophy section and I had heard that, like, I had heard briefly about this book, Process and Reality. It's very inaccessible, super difficult. So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna pick this thing up, see what this is all about. I pick it up. I'm looking at the front, right? The first maybe 20 pages, and I'm like, all right, I don't understand this.
And that
And
draws you in. You're like,
yeah,
I
so I
need
was
to get
like,
in now.
yeah, I was like, all right, this is an irritation. I don't, there's got to be something here, but I don't really know what it is yet. And then that kind of like is what drew me into looking at some of the work from say like Cobb or Griffin or people like that. And then with the help of them, it it really opened up, right? And I was able to go back to process and reality and get something, something out of it. And then, every time you go back to it, you
Mhm.
kind of feel like you learn more and maybe you're almost more confused at the same time.
Right.
So it was that whole process. And I just, to be honest, the the other philosophers of either the 20th century or earlier, they didn't really speak to me. I mean, perhaps some of the existentialists, I don't know, maybe some stuff with Nietzsche or with Kierkegaard or whatever were interesting, but nothing that seemed like grand in scale and scope, right? That was just like this big picture
Hmm. You were
system.
looking for the speculative cosmology and metaphysics.
I was looking for that. So that was sort of, it made sense.
Hmm.
Um,
Nice.
yeah, that's how
Yeah.
it happened.
Yeah, what's sort of the spiritual or like religious background you were kind of bringing to some of that speculative cosmology? Did it plug in a certain way, answer some questions that you felt were important that were open before that, or was this sort of something that opened you to new kind of horizons of spiritual and religious questioning for an initial time?
I'd say a bit more of the latter, but like so like I wasn't coming from a strong like Catholic, let's say. I might have had a very slight Catholic upbringing, but it was minimal to say the least. And I wasn't overly impressed or enthused by the the theology and what I heard. So it was nice to get the elements from process theology that are like modifying, say, the omnis, taking
Right.
away the omnipotence or something like that. That did call to me, but it wasn't more from like an earlier religious standpoint. It was more I have an interest in philosophy and the big questions. I've always been into the nature of ultimate reality, the meaning of life, right? The big questions. So since there were intriguing answers coming from Whitehead specifically, that just is what like really kept me going with it. I think I definitely have tried since then to incorporate his thought into different areas, different forms of spirituality, such as say like yoga. I got pretty into that for a while. Opened up a yoga studio in San Diego, down in Coronado. So I was doing that for a good while. Because that's something we could maybe talk about briefly. Is
Yeah,
that so? You're well aware that process theology has been pretty strongly linked to Christianity, for better or worse. And I think it's important. That's a great project, but it might be too closely linked, where it, it the whole idea is it's providing like a different novel framework, but then when you tie it so closely still to Christianity, I think it has become a bit maybe muddled and people might not understand why they should go for it. And I was always more on the let's like allow it to be its own thing, process theology. And yeah, let's do all these projects of trying to weave it into other stuff, but let's not let it get stuck in one way. So I was interested for a while in like how you could maybe incorporate some ideas from process thought into, say, the spiritual practice of a yoga community. Because that's another very popular in California,
right.
at
Hmm.
least, right? I'd say worldwide, but California for sure. Pretty big deal. When people are like, I'm spiritual but not religious, a lot of them might still be inclined to something like yoga. So, but then you have a real challenge because it's like, okay, how do you, and this is something I think we wanted to talk about on a maybe like bigger picture. How do you take some of these concepts from process philosophy and make it accessible? And that's not easy.
Right. Yeah, and it's kind of a big part of what we hope to do at the Center for Process Studies. And in some ways, we kind of have two poles of activities. Some is the conferences and very traditionally academic stuff, but then through hopefully this podcast, but also other ventures as well. Yeah, hopefully trying to make things a little more accessible and general and reach different audiences, connect with arts and spiritual practice, other things that are just generally of interest to people. So yeah, I'm curious, what was the ways you tried to kind of plug yoga and process thought together?
So, since at the time I was still coming more out of the dealing with interreligious dialogue and religious pluralism, I stuck more to that because I think people needed a framework separate from the perennial philosophy as an option, right, for how to say that they're interested in all these different religions, right? Um, so I pretty much focused more on that, and a lot of that work had already been done, right, in sort of like the academic realm, but it hadn't been maybe as pushed into these like practical communities, right? And that's what I tried to do and keep it simpler by having this like framework with multiple religious ultimates and that different religions can be focused on different components of reality and therefore they can all be correct, right? Type of thing. And that actually necessitates dialogue rather than almost shutting it down like the perennial philosophy doesn't intend to do that, but it kind of does, right? Like because it's like, all right, I'm a Christian, you're a Buddhist, but in the end we have the same summit. I don't, I'm not going to get anything of ultimate
Right.
importance, right, from talking to you. So just trying to open people up mainly to that, and I think that a lot of people were receptive to that way of looking at things.
Hmm.
So, and like shift and it kind of shifting out, explaining the whole like omnipotence and how you don't need to have that and how you can bypass a lot of these arguments from atheists by making these shifts, just kind of opening people up. And the way you'd sometimes do it is either at like a workshop, right? A weekend workshop type thing. It could be worked in with a little more depth, or the yoga teacher trainings, which are like 200-hour things. So in that context, I worked it in a lot. Or a theme. Like so you can sometimes a yoga class will have a theme at the beginning that a instructor might try and work in. So you could kind of do a little bit there for like 5 minutes at the beginning of a class. Simple stuff like that, really. I mean, now though, I mean, I know we were planning on talking about now. I'm more concerned and interested in AI
Yeah.
and how that plays into everything.
Mhm.
Um, specifically, I'm like wondering, since almost all the students, I mean, I shouldn't say that, a good amount of students are using AI. Maybe they're using it exclusively,
Mhm.
which is sad. I don't know what teaching really is anymore. It's certainly changed in the last 3 years. Um, I mean, it changed before that, just with online classes, but then changed again with AI. So my concern is like so many people today are in these like parasocial relationships or
Right.
maybe pseudo or quasi, they might not just be parasocial, whatever. It's these like not tr normal categories of what a relationship would be. So what does that even mean from like a Whiteheadian epistemology and viewpoint? Like that's what interests me. Like what's
Mhm.
even going on if I'm what does it even mean to prehend chat GPT? Doesn't make any
Uh-huh.
sense maybe. That's like
Uh-huh.
kind of what I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, yeah, let's get into it for sure. So, yeah, I guess as a little bit of context, some of the stuff I've seen recently, beyond the academic discourse here that has been around for a bit now, in terms of using AI to write and research, and there's varying degrees of quality of those types of methods, and maybe it can help in some ways, maybe it's very bad for your critical thinking in others, but now we've gotten to this point where there really are these sort of AI persona type bots that people are developing these more personal relationship with. It's not just a research tool; it's a therapist, or
Mhm.
I've even seen people doing the kind of thing that was portrayed in the movie Her, where there's a kind of romantic connection perceived between oneself and the AI bot that one is talking with and in some kind of relationship with. And so, a very interesting sort of dawning transhumanist sort of reality we have here. I guess one of the things I'm curious about your perspective on, coming from some of the Whitehead material. There's a lot of discourse about whether these AI agents are conscious, and it seems like the consensus, at least among more educated and reflective folks, is that no, this is a kind of algorithmic, statistical process that requires prompting to produce content. There's nothing in that would make one think this is any more conscious than your calculator. But if we are pan-experientialist, pan-psychist, that's a little bit of a different starting point. And yes, the
Yeah.
calculator itself does have some forms of rudimentary experience, even if it doesn't rise to the level of self-reflective consciousness that higher biological organisms exhibit. So, yeah, maybe we can unpack a little bit of that philosophical quagmire as like an initial foray into thinking about some of these social and interpersonal, inter AI personal sort of relations here. Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. So, I mean, for one thing, of course, like to your point about like, okay, are these conscious? What's going on, right? And it's a matter of time. It's already happening, but it's a matter of time, let's say, before we have the equivalent of some chat GPT type, AI inside of an Android. I mean, we're already pretty much there. So like, what's it really going to mean, right? What are you really interacting with? From a process perspective, we could take a couple approaches, right? Like we could try and make the case that it's just like I guess like a aggregate sort of society, and it's not that much different from a rock or something like that. I don't know. Sure, there's experience happening, like you said, pan-experientialism, but it's at at the level of like averaging across a bunch of very simplistic,
Right.
right? Atomic level stuff. So is that what's going on? Because if that's the case, that would of course seem to be quite distinct from the other option of it being like a living person with a compound individual. I can't remember all the terms, like with a dominant member, basically a
Yep.
regnant or presiding dominant member.
Yep.
So that's sort of the fundamental question, right? Here, is it what are we dealing with, one or the other? And it seems to matter quite a lot, like because again, like what does it mean? Am I if I'm like having a physical or hybrid prehension of some android on its mental pole, does its mental pole even exist in any great amount? I mean, again, that's going to depend on where we fall on the is
Yep.
it a is it essentially this like simple aggregate society or this other more living,
Hmm.
enduring person thing? So
Hmm.
I don't know. I think right now it's a challenge for me to accept that it's fully the same as you or I.
Hmm. Hmm.
But it does kind of feel like it's more than the simple picture.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah,
sure.
especially reading some of your work in preparation for this conversation and these ideas of Boltzmann brains and such
Yeah.
that we'll get into a bit more later. But yeah, hearing like, oh, there's perhaps like the right combinations of like temperature, entropy, these sort of physical relational properties that could give rise to consciousness. If that's one starting point, yeah, perhaps some silicone architecture that does statistical reasoning based on a training data set and etc. Well, maybe that has some of the right kinds of relational properties to have some kind of experience arise within it. But yeah, I think it's interesting trying to navigate between those two poles. I think I'm with you that it might be a little bit more than just the society of a rock or something. There does seem to be some kind of integrating and like coherence mechanism in these technologies that yeah, it does seem to intensify a center of experience, even if that's very simple computational experience. But yes, at the same time, I think it's quite different than the level of self-reflexivity and sort of yeah holistic, continuous conscious experience that even simpler biological organisms than human beings definitely exhibit. If you can have your Chat GPT application open for 24 hours straight, not type anything, type one thing in, get a little response, and well, was there any experience in that interim before you prompted it? Not
Hmm.
significantly, probably, and that's then very distinct from uh, how any kind of biological organism has its experience. Uh, I think I
It's a good point.
yeah, yeah. There's no world
Hmm.
for a large language model, and the reciprocity between yeah organism and environment, at least to me, seems essential to co-constitute some yeah reigning historical root of experience that yeah provides a center and coherence to a given conscious being.
I totally agree with you on that. I mean, I think even to your point about like, or if we talk about the architecture of it, right? Um, for one thing, like, yeah, we can talk about whether it can, there's an emergence, right, that can happen when the architecture is structured in a certain way, in more of like an integrated information, I guess that would be theory, right, of consciousness, where if there's sufficient feedback mechanisms or re-entrant architecture, I think is what they technically call that, where you then can eventually, that's what will create, right? Consciousness. I think there could be, some truth to that. And if we therefore if we intentionally structure, let's say, androids plus the way we're designing the AI, that yeah, maybe then it can be conscious and more conscious than we are even. All right. If we flip to the other end of the of the extreme, where it could go from one side to all of a sudden quickly being on the other, where it's where we actually do have artificial general or super intelligence, or art, let's rephrase it, artificial general consciousness, or super consciousness. Something like that, I think could happen relatively quickly, even if it's not happening now.
Hmm.
So for me, another element I think of this is like to bring Whitehead in. For him, right, consciousness is in this like higher phase of experience that's discussed in or the third part of process and reality. So if we're talking about like the process of concrescence, uh, on my view, I think the more like reversions, conceptual reversions and transmutations, I guess, maybe to use those terms, that occur, the the higher the chance for novelty and the higher the level of like consciousness.
Hmm.
That's kind of how I see it. So
Yeah.
if you structured something architecturally somehow to be able to achieve like our level or more, then maybe it is,
Hmm. Hmm.
I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Let's maybe unpack some of that yeah, Whiteheadianese a little bit here. Yeah, so reversions and yeah, could you give some basic yeah, definitions or examples of what this particular aspect of concrescence
Sure.
looks like?
Yeah, we're now we're past basic, so I guess. But so like if you're example that sometime might be it might be an easy one is like if I'm like prehending a stone, right? Like I've got this in my sort of in my paper. Like I'm prehending a stone and the whole like all the different the society that makes up that stone, this like nexus. Okay, I'm prehending it under a specific eternal object, and it's a stone, and it's simple, and all that, right? But the wider environment, to bring up your point, right? The wider environment might include, say, a predator coming at me in that moment, right? And so all of a sudden, the whole prehending of the stone could take on like new meaning where I'm like I'm able to view it, I guess, to simplify, I guess, like to see its potential in a new way, in a novel way, right? So as a weapon, say, right? In this case, but and that would require certain conceptual reversions. Like I'm going back and in trying to prehend it now in a novel pattern, and then a further question will become, does that need to come from God? That'll take us into the whole like, does God already have it all, so to speak? All of the eternal objects or all the possibilities, or can a person actually create something truly novel, right? In a unique moment. So that's sort of like I guess one example of that. And so like the more ways when you're kind of like spitting it back around of like before you achieve a satisfaction, we view it in a very linear way when we like try and look at like a billiard ball and slice it up, and this is what concrescence is, right? Moving from left to right, like with an arrow of time. But the reality, according to Whitehead, is like none of the stages are really finalized until the satisfaction. So there's sort of all this like chaotic dynamics like bouncing around, and a lot can happen in there. But if you're a proton, there isn't as much happening there. See, that's like right the difference between a psyche human level actual entity or occasion and something simple like I don't know a proton, where for a proton you are basically just reenacting for the most part. You're physically prehending a lot of things, and um there's not as much of this like hybrid, I guess, prehension and novelty that might come
Hmm.
through that or through like the initial aim
Hmm.
from God. So
Hmm.
there's a lot of stuff. I maybe opened up too many things.
No, no, great. Yeah, one example, and I'm not exactly sure where what sort of proper terminology this would fall under, but it's definitely a part of it. The human experience of temperature, we have like very distinct feelings of hot and cold. There's really qualitative experiences of putting one's hand in over a flame or putting one hand in some ice water. There's a really particular, unique kind of qualitative experience that arises out of that. Yet, like on the truly physical side of things, this is just a temperature gradation. This is we're dealing in the realm of a quantity of energy at this kind of molecular level, and we can mathematize that. But that qualitative aspect that we feel doesn't exist or in some kind of objective or kind of at a distance. It's through our kind of transmutation of prehending this quality through our senses that this feeling with a particular quality of coldness and hotness is distinct, but it's really in this narrow range of human temperature experiences that these even arise. So I think, yeah, thinking about that way, about how higher experience as conscious beings has these kind of novel qualitative transmutations of simpler physical experience that yeah, it's what really kind of creates our conscious experience as an organism. And likewise with color, I mean, there's these wavelengths, but and we can measure those in some kind of objective sense. But the blueness and redness that we get in our experience, that's something added through this, yeah, transmutation of this prehension into something of value. And of course, the eternal objects are core in that. So yeah, what do you think of
Yeah,
some of these examples?
so yeah, that's the good example. Like the temperature, you're right. Like there's all what we're basically dealing with is there's a bunch of excited air molecules or whatever, right? And on a physics maybe level or something, and then we are sensing or perceiving this, right, as burning or something like this, hotness, whatever, right? And so, yeah, like the eternal objects that are going to be associated with that, they're coming from a transmutation in this sense. So you're right, of like a bunch of different air molecules, right, in that region of space, I suppose. But the question is like the so this this eternal object or form that might come up, like your example of the color, maybe is more familiar, right, to people with colors. So what's really going on there, and where is it coming from? The answer is what? God?
Right, right.
I guess. And that kind of takes us into this bigger, broader picture and problem that I have issue with,
Hmm.
which is like, does the primordial nature of God contain or envisage, whatever, like all of the eternal objects? Yes, for Whitehead, right? That's the answer.
Right. Hmm.
I don't like that. I've never liked it. I mean, aside from there, just like there's a lot of problems that unfold from it. My big picture issue with it is like I don't really understand. I don't understand how, like, why even have a process to reality at all? Like, what's gained? It's bizarre that like nothing can be gained for God, really. Even whatever we think is like novelty we're creating is on my mind just like taking one choice or other in a predetermined choose your own adventure game, like something like that, really, like
Right.
Whitehead's God isn't really gaining anything, aside from the fact that if he's in eternal concrescence, it's not even it's not even possible to to shift over and receive things back from the world. So there's just a lot of problems, right, with it. And I don't personally understand why. I think the reason why a lot of people have tried to hold on to it, that that God has all these things, is Christianity.
Interesting. Draw out that
That's
connection. Yeah. Uh-huh.
I think we just got to be honest about it because if you're coming from a Christian background and you still want to really retain the Christianity, I think we all know that if you know enough about process theology, you've modified God already sufficiently where it's not a God worthy of worship. To me, it is, but like that's the for Christians,
Yeah, more
it's a problem.
traditionally minded folks feel that these omnis we've been talking about are some of the kind of cause for the worshipability of a deity.
Exactly, which I don't, I get it. On one hand, I get it. I don't really understand the necessity for perfection. Um, Maybe because you can't have trust, and if something's not perfect, that's the only thing I can really get with that. But I think to bring it back to what we were just saying here is that if if God, if we have to modify even more things, like getting rid of God potentially having envisaging all these eternal objects, we're weakening God even further. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So we can't do that, especially if we're coming from a Christian framework and we want to try and maintain more of it. I'm not. I'm not coming from a Christian framework.
Sure.
I'm coming from I don't care. I just want to know what seems to make the most sense.
Right. Uh-huh.
It's always been my thing.
Hmm.
So, and that's not to say that what I'm trying to suggest isn't without its problems, because it sure it is. I just I just don't like the idea that it's all coming from God. And
Hmm.
I mean, even if it is, if the initial aim is coming from God, how often does that initial aim actually finally form the subjective aim that leads to like the satisfaction? It seems like
Hmm.
most people are falling way short, right? Or going askew big time from whatever that might have been. So
Right.
yeah.
Hmm.
You could even bring back to AI too. If AI is giving you all your answers on what to do in life, it seems like that's replaced God in terms of an initial
Hmm.
and final
Hmm.
sort of aim,
Hmm.
um, which begs a lot of questions again, ties back to our earlier discussion because like, is this thing really super conscious or not? If it is, then maybe you should follow it. But if it isn't, then I don't know. What are you really doing?
Right. 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 Interesting.
Right?
Yeah, I can see another way that the true eternality of all the eternal objects with God is perhaps religiously comforting or coherent from a Christian standpoint, given the like very central role that sacred history plays in kind of even opening up like salvation history and
Right.
final destination of human beings. If there's at least, yeah, the possibility of the crucifixion and the resurrection held with God since time immemorial, that seems very coherent and gives some credence to the way that then, yeah, this sacred history developed. But if this was something that was a really truly novel possibility that originated from the actual world, from creatures, there's something kind of striking about, oh, like it could have gone differently. We could have had a cosmos that did not involve the incarnation, the crucifixion, the resurrection, and thus the whole kind of dynamics of salvation that are kind of part and parcel of the Christian story. And feeling that that is contingent is yeah, a very
Let
different
me
sort of religious orientation.
let me play on what you just said, especially if we could erase a lot of history somehow from people. If we could keep all the technology but erase a lot of the history, let's project 20 years into the future. Tell me there's not going to be people talking about divine insibernation.
Right.
You know what I mean? It would easily, you could have a similar yet quite different, right? Sort of salvation story. I mean, it's still developing as is, even within the
Hmm.
timeline, let's call it, or the reality, where you do have the typical more incarnation story. I mean, you've got Krishna as an incarnation story anyhow, too. You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Right. Uh-huh.
So it's not like we solely even have just the story with Jesus.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I grant your point in terms of the cohesion that you can have there.
Hmm.
But if you're already accepted, if you want to go that road, you should probably just stay the more traditional forms of Christianity, I guess, is what like so if you're already accepting some of the claims of Whitehead and process theology, I feel like you've already opened the can of worms. Like I
Hmm.
don't know, Pandora's box is open. I don't know how you want to look at
Sure.
it, but you're on a different journey. I feel
Hmm.
like now,
Hmm.
and you might accept the ride.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
See
Yeah.
where it goes.
Yeah, I think there is a possibility, though, and I'm speaking speculatively here as a non-Christian as well, to, yeah, valorize something of the contingency and creatureliness of how sacred history and salvation history could develop from this different framework where the eternal objects are not held from time immemorial by God in their totality. Perhaps, yeah, there's something very beautiful about the uniqueness and historical particularity and radical creaturely freedom that is then exemplified in the life of Jesus and the subsequent moments of, yeah, crucifixion and resurrection. So I think there might be possibilities, and it might be an interesting place that some of the process stuff could plug in with the more radical theology tradition, as some of our colleagues are doing interesting work there, trying to bridge some of those. So
And I'd like
perhaps,
to talk, and I'd love to have conversations with the broader community that are more focused on the Christian. And when I say Christian, we could easily say Jewish or Muslim. I mean, I think that there's enough similarities in terms of Abrahamic or whatever, let's say religions. We could include those. And it would be nice to have a discussion with them. I just think that it depends on what your goal too is, right? Like if the goal is a broader acceptance of some of the core ideas coming out of process philosophy, then we've got to be willing to try to articulate those concepts, right,
right.
in ways that branch free from
Hmm.
any of the Abrahamic, right, religions. Like
Right.
that work's already being done actively, as you said, which is good. And it's been done in the past for decades. So, but how many people can we name doing all the work? There are people doing stuff with Buddhism or whatever else, but like, I just think outside of it completely, that's kind of maybe what like the eco civ that there are things going on, right? And that's all well and good. I think for me, I'd like to see more of the focus on that. Um, but I mean, if we want to jump back into like the whole issue with the eternal objects more specifically and with God, in part five of Process and Reality, where there's a lot of God in the world talk,
Right.
there's this idea, right, that it's as true to basically say that the world creates God as that God creates the world, something like that. Maybe I'm paraphrasing. I don't know if that's the direct quote. It's near the end, right, in part five. Um, so, how is that statement true if we can't create, if there's no possibility for novelty for God? If God, why can't God have propositional feelings, but we can? That doesn't strike me as can God create a stone so heavy that even God can't lift it or some not like some logical
Right.
impossibility claim or
Hmm.
something.
Hmm.
It's not I mean, we can do it. We're doing it all the time. So it's bizarre that that's a limitation. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, and God
Uh,
is an actual entity, per Whitehead's philosophy, as are other creatures. So, yeah, that there are possibilities for, yeah, propositional feelings and similar available to other actualities, but not God, who is the preeminent occasion in some regards. Yeah, there's an interesting tension there.
yeah, it's a weird, and I'm not really sure. I mean, I think I you can resolve it by doing these modifications, right? By
Uh-huh.
taking away this notion, like by making God a serially ordered society of occasions of experience, right? Making that shift and not it having God in eternal concrescence. So I think you got to make that shift, right? Um, so do that, and then relinquish this claim that God has to have all of them, and instead has some initial set of them, and that through the interaction between God and the other actual entities, that whole process, that dynamic, the other ones arise. So like universals arise. Like in my paper I was trying to say that like universality need not entail eternality, basically. So by that I'm suggesting that like redness, to jump back into our color thing, right? Redness could develop at some point in this process. Like, why does redness even need to exist 13.5, 13.6 billion years ago before there's any creatures on any planet, anywhere with cones and rods to detect this stuff? It doesn't
Right.
really make a whole lot of sense why it would need to be there.
Hmm.
To me,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah, here's like an aspect of this that I'd be interested to kind of unpack a little bit. So like the eternal objects, as like pure potentialities, they're potential. They are not actual. They are have not ingressed into reality to kind of actually be experienced in this way you're talking. Yeah, the rods and cones, they produce this experience of redness, but redness is also, yeah, this pure potentiality. And so it's interesting to like even think about these things in terms of temporality, in terms of their, yeah, non-actuality. What does it mean for yeah, redness to be eternal? Because yeah, I mean, there's definitely, we can absolutely from Whitehead's philosophy say redness did not actually ingress into experienced actuality until a certain point in history. That I think is totally orthodox
So
Whitehead.
yeah, let's it is. So let's
Mhm,
take that and let me ask you something on this. Like
mhm,
the first time redness does ingress,
mhm.
right? In some creature, okay? So how does the experiential nature of the redness, right? Like you're saying, how is that not going to alter? It's theoretical versus experiential is how I view it. Like
Sure.
theoretical
Yeah, yeah,
knowledge
yeah.
versus
Hmm.
experiential wisdom,
Hmm.
let's say. So like the experience and the wisdom coming from the redness on the lived scale for the creature, how does that not, when prehended back into God, how does that not alter what redness was for God? And furthermore, let's say you're right that redness hadn't ingressed, but it was in an actual entity. It was in God, you know. They all have to be somewhere. They're not in
Right.
some platonic, atemporal, aspatial, wherever it
Hmm.
is.
Right.
Right thing. So I don't know, what's your take on that? Like how is that not something that would alter
Hmm.
whatever redness is for God, I
Right.
guess.
Right. Yeah, no, I think I've been convinced by your argument here. I think I yeah, like the modification of allowing eternal objects or whatever language we might want to use for these pure potentialities to not all be held exclusively by God since time immemorial, but to arise also temporally within given creatures. And yeah, the example of the stone as a weapon, that happened for a first time in human history, maybe even pre-human history. It could be possible that other higher organisms
Mhm.
were the first to make that type of prehension. And yeah, maybe that's then added to God as a new possibility that hadn't been envisaged prior. One of the, yeah, kind of interesting things I've thought about here is like, okay, how many eternal objects are there? Probably infinite. I mean, even if we like limited it to like say a very narrow region of color, you could kind of subdivide color into innumerable
Sure.
gradations. And so like when we have this idea of God as having all the eternal objects since the first moment of the cosmos, to order an infinite set, there's something like I mean, this is a little bit of an odd way to think about deity, but I think you might be amenable to it. That seems computationally like impossible. It just seems like too much stuff to be doing versus, yeah, accumulating new and relevant forms of potentiality over time. Well, it doesn't get to infinity. I mean, it gets to more and more and more. But at least that's still an orderable set versus a
True.
truly infinite set. So
I like that. I agree with you. Even if we're taking, even if it wasn't infinite, it was just a lot or something. The idea that somehow the primordial nature of God has ordered it for relevance is bizarre because the primordial nature of God is like not conscious. So that's weird to me because to me that seems like a highly conscious activity.
very valuative in its very like language here, ordering
Yeah.
for relevance. That's a valuative act, not a purely computational
But
one.
but you know what? Maybe this is back to even our AI. If AI is not really that conscious and it's extremely good at ordering things.
Right? Mm-hmm.
So maybe there's
Mm-hmm.
something to be said. And
Mm-hmm.
to be fair, they don't say, or it doesn't, Whitehead doesn't say, he says it's conceptually evaluating or whatever, right? Them, which I guess is like technically on his like process of concrescence, a different phase or part of it than the conscious phase. But regardless, it still seems like you're ordering things. It requires like a lot of judgment, yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
evaluation. Like I don't know how it's sort of strange for it to be done.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of strange for it to be done without consciousness because an LLM or AI can do it because we already did it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You see, so that's not really, I think, like a fair analogy.
Right.
So if we wanted to try to apply that to like, okay, well, then maybe what? This God, there was something else than before that, then we're in some infinite regress.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like
Right. Right.
on that. So I don't think it's actually like a complete like fair analogy since yeah, like we basically gave the initial data set for the AI. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know what would have given it, for God, I guess, on this view. But generally, just to me, it makes sense that you would have a process to reality if there's something being gained. Like I think you're literally trying to
Sure.
create universals.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like I honestly think that's sort of like the purpose to reality is
Mm-hmm.
essentially that. Not just for for us and our enjoyment, but yeah, like for of course God or any other levels of being that might that might be out there. Um, because that just continues to, like exponentially, I guess, expand the possibility space
Right.
for
Mm-hmm.
what life can be like.
Yeah. What I really like about this is, instead of, God just having all these possibilities, and the only option for becoming for any agent, any actual occasion is you either kind of follow the divine lure and choose the best possible kind of route for your next moment of becoming. And then oh that's great and you're in harmony with kind of the cosmos and truth, goodness, beauty, all that, blah blah blah. But if you don't do that, it's kind of only negative. You've only kind of fallen short. But I think in this revised conception, when you ingress a novel universal that was not envisaged by the kind of totality of the divinity, you might have like found an aim that is something more than just the aim provided by God. You might have found a novel possibility even better than
Yeah.
what was envisaged and given, and then you've contributed that to God and to the forward progression of the cosmos as a whole. That's very exciting. I like the reciprocity and co-creativity involved in that
And
vision.
that's what it was supposed to be anyhow. So I thought, right? Initially when I really started to get into it. But then when you learn more, you're like, wait a second, what's going on here? But so it's more about like finding how how that reciprocity actually works. And the fact that to what you're saying, the suggestion here is there could be a moment, there could be sort of an occasion of experience where you are transcending in a sense God. Not that you have more. I mean, God might still have vastly more possibility or whatever, but like the fact that you have created this novelty, right? This novel universal, it could be an aim or whatever. in that moment, you have something that God doesn't even have, and that's a unique way to talk about like things. Now, in the next moment, God might have it, right? Or something on this feed, and that's great, and can do crazy stuff with it or something. But yeah, I think that's a really important way for us to feel valued in this whole process.
Hmm. Hmm.
Not just that we're cool, we have the freedom to choose between an infinite playbook.
Hmm. Hmm.
And we can go and cycle back and choose different options, but it's all known and all been done before in a sense.
Hmm.
So yeah. Now if we wanted to look into how, I don't know if you want to talk about that, like this is where it
Sure.
gets really complicated, I think. Was like how might that occur?
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things I'm thinking of here now. So let's sketch out a little bit of a hypothetical thought experiment here. So, planet Earth, you have some human being who uses a stone as a weapon for the first time. This new universal of stone as weapon, this proposition is then taken up by God in the cosmos. And okay, flash over to some planet, some other solar system, some other galaxy. It has also higher life forms. Well, God now has this new possibility, new potentiality. There's definitely no kind of clear material causality between Earth and this other planet here. But it seems that in Whitehead's scheme, well, this new universal is now available for God to kind of offer up to occasions in their concressing, and so is now an inheritance at a distance, and in some kind of very mystical sort of way possible, with this universal having ingressed in a very far away region of the cosmos. Yeah, what does that look like?
That's 100% agreement with you on a panentheistic, at least, which I do adhere to that,
Mhm.
right? Um, I mean, I might think that there's kind of even like layers within this like panentheism of like much higher orders, but like yes, if we're viewing God as sort of the ultimate, right, encompassing uh aspect to this, then yeah, there's no reason why it couldn't just be anywhere else, right?
Yeah.
In the universe or
Hmm.
multiverse or whatever you want to, I don't know, whatever you want to take.
Right.
It could sort of be anywhere in the next moment, so to speak. And that would apply to us though, and if we reversed it, like maybe some of our greatest intuitions and stuff weren't actually just ours. Maybe they were though coming because something else came up with it and boom, and then God gives it to us as an initial,
Yeah.
maybe that could explain some intriguing sort of epiphanies or whatever
Sure.
that
Yeah.
have come on our side of things.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I mean, yeah, it's I totally accept that.
Hmm.
I think that's
Nice.
what happens.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, interesting. Yeah, that opens a lot of possibilities for things that are normally foreclosed in a typical physicalist
Hmm.
framework of yeah, some kind of action or causality at a distance without yeah, yeah, it's complicated what language we'd use for it, but yeah, the idea that yeah, some possibility can arise in total novelty in our universe in one far off place, and then be ingressed due to yeah this conceptual valuative role of God offering up possibilities in a totally disparate part of the universe. Okay, now we might have some metaphysical grounds for all kinds of yeah mentality at a distance, and
And yeah, and I'm all for the possibility of all that stuff, whether we're looking at holographic sort of thing, non-locality, quantum entanglement, all those things. Like, I think that there's certainly relevance conceptually to those things when talking about panentheism and all of that. Um, Certainly, there's so much talk lately about, I think it's called celestial holography or something, trying to take the stuff from Juan Maldacena's like 95, whatever that was, 96, most cited ever scientific sort of paper, the ADS CFT sort of like correspondence thing, and but normalizing it for like our type of universe, I think that's called like celestial holography. I'm not 100% outside of my wheelhouse, I guess. But
Sounds sufficiently cool. Let's go with it.
but like there's a lot of people I think have this, there's something to this idea of like a boundary, right? Or like a container or whatever you want to look at it, right? And it all the information effectively, it's closer to the actual reality, if you will.
Sure.
Sort of deal. And that there's sort of a non-locality though to that, like the information that's sort of on that. So I think there's ways in which we could plausibly discuss what we have been discussing and then make it sound less crazy from a
Bring in
physics.
some of the actual empirical scientific work you're saying.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't think I'm the one to speak to that, but I think that there's enough out there where it doesn't sound as wild.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, I mean, I still think there's something to be said for like how, if you're making this claim that a human being can do this, like how on earth does that happen? And part of the answer for me for that is that Whitehead's ontological principle has an inherent piece to it that hasn't been properly explored, I think.
Nice. Yeah.
Specifically, if the whole point of the ontological principle is that like you everything must be somewhere type of thing, and it refers to some actual entity, doesn't have to be God. If there's always been like a multiplicity of some kind, always of like actual entities, even if it's just like chaotic subatomic realm, right, of things, um, then you could understand randomness. This might seem like a cop out, like cheating way to go about things, but you could think of randomness. Anytime you have NESS in English, right? Like we're talking about a form basically.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's like, okay, clearly randomness is like a universe. It's not like a particular. So, like so it could be though, randomness could be always have been held, for lack of a better term, in these like simplistic subatomic particles, and it's being passed constantly, like amongst them, and that God, although encompassing all of this, might not be part of God's like maybe a fundamental nature
Sure.
in the same way. And so there's this like classic order versus chaos type of right mythology almost going on here. But the idea is that like Whitehead would call these non-social nexuses, I guess, essentially.
Nexus.
Yeah, whatever the plural is there. So, um, and we're prehending that like there's tons of that, right? Constantly coming in of stuff that is like negatively prehended, basically. But again, negatively prehended does not mean it disappears. This is what people I think have a misconception. It's like, oh, I negatively prehend something. It's no longer part of this picture, this emerging satisfaction. Whitehead specifically states as much that it is.
Mhm.
So, okay, and I agree that it is. And so it's like the way I'm looking at this is like you you can just have a lot of randomness that's coming in that could like somehow help to create this like novel, right? Universal.
Right.
But more specifically, I think the process of all these like conceptual reversions and the transmutations, the more there are, the greater the chance for like, and I try to use like waves as an analogy, like a rogue wave, where basically there just could be, a peak, some like spike where it emerges in like out of that roiling sea of chaos from all of that.
Hmm. Hmm.
I mean, I know that's not like a great answer, but it's something maybe.
Yeah, yeah. I think it feels like a cop out if one is still within a typical physicalist substance metaphysics frame. It's like, okay, how does this like quantum level randomness translate up to human level freedom and things like that? But yeah, once you have this totally different metaphysical starting point, and you get universals passed in interesting and novel ways, and you see how some of these same processes happen at different levels, and something at this quantum level can ingress at say the human conscious level in interesting and novel ways. Yeah, I think it works. And
It's like noise, like there's like
exactly.
noise induced order kind of almost. Like I
Mhm.
so that's sort of I guess what I'm getting at is like especially if there's all these like conceptual reversions
Exactly.
happening on stuff that like you could have effectively just like a totally random mutation almost, right?
Right.
There, for lack of a better term, that on it's almost like a random mutation on whatever the eternal object was at the time that was like defining it. And that God doesn't need to get credit,
Sure.
on
Hmm.
that like picture,
Hmm.
basically.
hmm
So yeah,
Yeah,
I
and I
mean, it's the
mean,
best I've got on it.
yeah, sure. Yeah, but no, it seems to connect up well with all kinds of different research and discourses. And I mean, yeah, taking it back to the LLM architecture, in these, systems, some amount of noise and arbitrariness is an essential part of what allows these statistical networks to, most of the time, operate pretty effectively and generate things that are human seeming in terms of verbal content, but still like novel and connected to the prompt. Noise is an essential kind of aspect of that. If you have no noise, then this is just a plagiarism bot, and it spits out exact copies of material from the training data. If you have too much noise, then you get gibberish and uh, content that is no longer coherent or sensible. And that's all kind of totally independent of the possible like truth value of the propositions these things are producing. But so I think this this noise and randomness aspect is definitely relevant, and connecting the quantum subatomic puffs with
Yeah,
the concrescence, and how this has opportunities for reversion and noise in its own way. Very
because like
interesting.
because like basically again, randomness cop out maybe it could be understood as a form. I mean, we could certainly debate what that even means or if that's possible what that means, but let's say we accept it and it's like okay, then it's inside these other actual entities which may themselves in a panentheistic manner be inside of God or something,
Right.
right? But you can be in something but not of it fully for one thing, right? So there's kind of like that whole thing. And to your LLM, like what you're just talking about, like they hallucinate, right? Maybe less so now. I don't know as more versions come out, but there could be actually the hallucination is viewed as a problem,
Hmm.
right? Like normally.
Right.
But I'm basically saying, like, sure, there could be out of every 10,000 hallucinations, maybe there's one that actually is like, whoa, what?
That's some
Like,
novelty, baby.
yeah. Like that actually isn't what we were thinking or looking for, but like, wow, all right.
It's evocative and has
Yeah,
really provided something. Uh-huh.
exactly. So it could be kind of like that process, I
Uh-huh.
guess.
No, that's interesting. I like how, this problem of the hallucinating AI is actually also the potential location of its very true intelligence, like true creativity, true intelligence
Yeah,
is the same thing as this problem that
yeah.
the engineers are trying to solve with it.
I
Yeah,
think that's really
that's
interesting
interesting.
to me because, like, 'cause, yeah, like it's a problem, but like, yeah, that's kind of the most interesting part. Yeah, 99% of it isn't interesting, but 99% of what people are saying isn't very
Right. Right. No, true.
I guess a lot of the time.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I don't think we should try and like
Mhm.
scratch it, do what we
Right.
can to scrub it from it. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah.
One thing I was thinking of in terms of the randomness a little earlier in the conversation was when we were talking about God, sort of valuing and sorting all these eternal objects. Maybe that itself is a process which has some noise to it, and that's what allows it to happen, even if there's this sort of innumerable or infinite set. Interesting possibility there.
Yeah, that's I can see that. I could I can accept that. I mean, these are the conversations like we're having now that I've like wanted to have, you know? I don't feel like too many of them have happened that at least that I've been a part of. So, uh I want to I like this idea of trying to push Whitehead's. I mean, it's called process philosophy for a reason.
Uh, he wanted to leave it speculative and open-ended and open to
Yeah.
revision from new experience and data. So,
Pretty sure he didn't want us to just take it and be like, it's done, it's complete, right? Sort of thing. So I would hope he would be appreciative of these sort of like conversations, you know, like where it's critiquing his work, right?
uh,
I know that you have been working. I mean, I know you said you're working on some new material. Maybe we can. I'd like to hear what that is.
yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm doing some stuff with a friend in Norway, sort of
Hmm.
at the intersection of religious pluralism and ecology, and yeah, thinking about how the kind of aims of sort of interreligious harmony and solidarity, and yeah, even cross-fertilization can themselves be oriented towards kind of ecological harmonization. And ecological civilization, and vice versa. How yeah, sort of the movement towards a more ecological future can intrinsically, through its kind of very movements, be productive of the kind of container for a healthier interreligious engagement. So it's kind of complicated stuff, but I mean, at its base, I'm dealing with more processed kind of deep religious pluralism sort of orientation that sort of has this perspective of okay, each of these great wisdom traditions, whatever we want to call them, likely has something irreducibly unique and valuable to contribute to ecological thought and living. And we should probably bring these different traditions together to sort of share these values in this very kind of open dialogue sort of way, where hopefully, say the Buddhist can really come to understand the aspect that is uniquely exemplified in Christianity that may have something to contribute to our ecological future, but at the same time, be able to find that same kind of value in a kernel in Buddhism. Maybe it's less emphasized, maybe it comes in a different form, maybe it's spread out, but through having heard the really cohesive exemplification of this value in Christian language, be able to more readily identify synergies within one's own tradition. So run this process a bunch, and hopefully you have now religions that have come to integrate in totally endogenous ways these diverse values from other traditions. That is nonetheless coherent, cohesive, and now you have hopefully religions that are a bit more supercharged to tackle ecological collapse and moving towards a more positive future, while at the same time being much more in harmony with one another. That's the elevator pitch.
I like it. So let me now. I have a couple. I have a couple questions to now. Now I'm interviewing you. So, one thing, are you focusing? It sounds like you're focusing on both comparing and contrasting, right?
Yeah.
Of them, right? So
Mhm.
I think that's good. There's always too much work on the comparison
Yeah, sure.
and not enough on the contrasting, and not
Mhm.
contrasting to create like conflict, but to show where there's options for enrichment, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Mhm.
So yeah, like I agree on that a lot. That's one thing. So maybe we could even go down like some specific examples. I'm happy to do that because I have a pretty strong religious study. That's my primary
Right,
area.
sure.
So we could definitely go down that. I'd like to hear your thoughts of specifics. So, well, maybe let's take them one at a time. Why don't we do that?
Let's do it.
What, let's get some specific examples. What do you think are sort of like the best, like top two or three from different traditions
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
they should all like kind of learn from one another?
Yeah, yeah, I can definitely take that. So I think a very easy starting point is emptiness in Buddhism, as a lot of deep ecological thought has drawn inspiration from this. So it has a little bit of a track record as sort of a ecologically poignant metaphysical principle, whatever you want to call it. And yep, certainly something that is core and central in Buddhist worldview, practice, metaphysics. If you encounter Buddhism at any level of depth, you will probably encounter emptiness or some form of thought or practice influenced by this idea of emptiness or shunyata. But say you're a Christian, you don't have emptiness in Christian tradition. This isn't something that exists. But there is this interesting aspect of the incarnation known as kenosis,
That's
which
true.
is the self emptying of
Hmm.
Christ. And maybe through an encounter with a Buddhist valuation of emptiness that places this as very central, perhaps we can, in Christianity, radicalize and elevate this idea of kenosis and especially how it connects to personhood and the humanity of Christ. And interesting, personhood, humanity. These themselves are perhaps ecologically poignant ideas for Christians. This incarnational worldview, cosmos having divinity ingressed in it, this idea of the person as something of unique and sort of irreducible value. I think we might
Yeah.
want to think ecologically in some of those terms. But if we do this, not in this kind of isolated Christian way, but in a way where our Christianity has already been suffused with some Buddhist emptiness that is expressed then through this kenotic idea, okay, we might have something a little more powerful now, even. And so that's kind of the basic form I'm imagining here. And okay, now do these between Buddhism and Islam and see what kind of similar interchange can happen there. And okay, now once you've had some of these transmutations, you end up with a Buddhism that has integrated in yeah a very Buddhistic sort of way these values with ecological poignancy from a number of different wisdom traditions. So it's still totally Buddhism. It's still totally
Mhm.
in fact, it has become even more Buddhist in this process. It hasn't become something foreign or distinct from itself as kind of some historical lineage of a tradition, but has kind of radicalized some of its internal values that were less emphasized, more hidden. Some of the connections have been drawn out, and now it's all the
I,
more ecologically attuned. Fingers
I
crossed.
I like this. I like the Shunyata versus Kenosis, right? Or not versus, the comparison, right? Between the two, I think that those are two core concepts that especially the kenosis isn't always focused on, and
Yeah.
how much you can really even do with that conceptually of that idea of like self-emptying, especially if you want to talk about imitation of God or imitation that's I guess kind of almost like the starting point of the journey before Jesus. So like
Yeah.
it seems like that should be a very like foundational piece to constantly
Hmm.
be open and receptive. I definitely would think too with Buddhism, there's a lot with the impermanence concept, and then with what is it, praticca samuppada, or however you pronounce that, the
Yeah.
dependent co-arising seems like yeah, like really valuable in terms of an ecological right
Hmm.
framework. There's so much there that's rich between those two traditions. I mean, I from the Christian side, I don't know. It's like the stewardship maybe thing, I feel like, and Genesis 1, 2 type
Hmm.
stuff might, you know, be valuable, right? Not that Buddhists would ever disagree
Right. Yeah.
with that. So, I mean, I love this stuff. This was
Mhm.
sort of I'm with you. Like,
Mhm.
this is what I think is the type of work that needs to be done. Taking it, the interreligious dialogue, and bringing it into these practical uh, issues,
Mhm. Mhm.
whether it's climate change or just a
Right.
eco-civ, whatever, right, on a
Mhm.
broader
Mhm.
scale. And
Yeah.
all the religions do have something that they could add to this, I
Mhm.
think.
Mhm.
Might be a
Yeah.
challenge to get to some of them,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
but
For sure. Yeah, yeah, and I think I mean even very kind of thoughtful, well-meaning interreligious dialogue. I mean, what's the telos? What is this oriented towards? Like beyond just kind of a feel-good like toleration or coexistence, and not that those are bad things whatsoever, but I think there are even higher aims than just those that would actually make this a more coherent and oriented process that then yeah produces more tangible kind of effective results again hopefully but yeah I think having that framing of okay we're doing this interreligious dialogue for this like ecological crisis context we're in and it makes it a little more poignant gives it a little more yeah, constraint in sort of a positive sense that then can orient
it gi-
folks
it gi-
together.
it gives I agree with you. And it gives religion a new kind of purpose too and meaning than just a battleground with
Yeah,
science over truth, which is not
yeah,
interesting.
right,
I mean,
right,
not anymore. To me, it's like that we've all heard that. For one thing, I think that people misunderstand, like on the atheist side, typically, that religion is about hope as much as it's about truth. So it's a whole edifice of like hopes. And so even if you could take it away, you're creating a nightmare
right.
because you just put so much of the planet into a state of despair,
Yeah.
right? So there's
Mhm,
that, but then there's like this wisdom tradition
mhm,
component,
mhm.
which I think you're like really focusing on here, like right,
Yep.
the ecological, especially like wisdom, and that is something that provides, I think, a really important counter. Even the
Mhm.
oldest, like indigenous sort of religions,
Yeah. Hmm.
viewing on a real like pan experientialist, where essentially an animistic
Yeah.
even viewpoint. I'm not saying we should believe that fully, but it's valuable to get back to the intrinsic value piece, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Of all things, which might make you less likely to do deforestation
Yeah.
or whatever, right? Destroy the rivers and stuff like that,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, the other piece of this that is kind of top of my mind is, yeah, exactly kind of what you're saying here. Yeah, people outside of a spiritual lineage, it's easy to have existential despair given our current context.
Yeah.
But I think this kind of rising demographic of the unaffiliated, the nuns,
Mm,
shows that nonetheless the institutional religions remain quite unattractive to large swaths of the contemporary populace. I think you need to be realistic about that. And so the other hope here is okay, maybe these transformed, ecologized versions of the religions themselves may become more attractive to
mm.
the those outside of these lineages. But even not, even if they don't sort of rise to a level of okay, I want to convert and become affiliated with this tradition. Uh, Hopefully, this yeah process of cross fertilization has created a context where cherry picking is richer and more coherent, and you can take your yeah emptiness from Buddhism and your incarnational spirituality from Christianity, and without sort of becoming Buddhist or Christian, uh, draw these into your personal spirituality, and in a way that because these things have been more mutually transformed, it actually kind of hangs together now. in a way that isn't so kind of sporadic and idiosyncratic and yeah, only reflective of sort of one's own personal preferences and yeah,
I agree.
mindfulness, spirituality type stuff. So
Well, so that's where to tie it back to the process, that's what's to me, that's what it was always so attractive about like process philosophy as a framework is that it allows you to do something like this with all the religions, but still put it into this other more neutral, cohesive thing, this sort of process framework, and then that helps it all hold together in a more like coherent way. And I mean, I really love the idea that you can enrich your spiritual experience. You know what I mean? Like the from dialogue or from practicing the actual either rituals or exercises or techniques of the various traditions, especially if you do accept the claim that like there there's more than just God that can be sacred or something like that, and therefore there's other trajectories
hmm
you can be focused on in your spiritual life. I think that's really important and valuable to like the nuns, as you were
yeah,
saying, right? Like they don't have to focus on the God piece if not, right? There's like other things they can focus on
hmm
and still get value from the wisdom,
hmm
right, that
hmm
exists in these traditions.
hmm
I guess one other thing with whatever time we have left, I was kind of curious your take. Um, and it maybe even ties into some of the stuff we were talking about a little bit earlier. There's something about like kind of we're talking about like boundary zones or the hallucinations or something with the
yeah,
AI, but there's something in my mind to be said, and this is an ecology thing though, about certain biomes. So to be specific, I don't remember the terminology, like ecotones or something like the edge, like where a
Ooh.
forest meets a meadow.
Okay.
I don't know, something like that, right?
We're
Or
back to brains, membranes.
or yeah, but like where the ocean meets the land, right? Any of these
Yep.
like I think that in terms of even like the eco civ work on a practical level about like spiritualizing, I don't know, something this, but without it being like from a religious tradition, I think there's something to be said about novelty even, but also therapeutic
hmm
value of like transitional spaces, times, events, I don't know, stuff like that, that they seem to hold kind of like a unique, magical almost quality. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if that does that make any sense? Like, if
Yeah.
I physically dwell in what is a border or boundary zone in like a ecotone or biome, does it make me more open to healing or novelty?
hmm
I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
your take is on that?
I love it. Yeah, I mean, one, like, I think there's clear evidence that spirituality itself is ecological. The
Mhm.
kind of desert mysticism
Mhm.
one
Mhm.
finds is quite different in character from, say, the visionary jungle shamanic practices one also finds, and yet these are both clearly spirituality. And I think rerouting mysticism, spiritual experience, in particular ecological zones with their unique characteristics is important contemporary work. But I like the boundary idea, the boundary piece. This is a place where you have some liminality, you have some mixing,
Yes, yeah.
and
Mhm.
perhaps one of the roles that human beings can have ecologically, especially in this current moment, is as kind of non-local organisms. We are non-locally adapted. You can be a human in Greenland, you can be a human in Africa, and these can all kind of work, and you can be adapted to these different zones, and that's pretty unique compared to other organisms. And so, especially as humanity has continued to grow and develop, we've become nomadic, we've crossed different eco zones. But on the whole, in say more indigenous times, people were pretty rooted in their particular ecological zones and became deeply, deeply adapted to those zones. Now, in more contemporary times, we've emphasized sort of this non-local aspect of human beings, and people are moving around all the time. They're not particularly adapted to their given local ecologies, and that's rather disastrous, in fact. But I think there's a synthesis possible here where, especially by leveraging some of these boundary conditions, maybe we can integrate more kind of localized bio adaptability and spirituality while also cross fertilizing these things, becoming more translatable by leveraging our kind of non-local adaptability. And so at that point, yeah, you have a possibility at least for a deeper local adaptability that isn't just kind of stemming from a more enclosed kind of relationship with the ecosystem. In fact, the adaptability in a given zone is constituted by inspiration from adaptability that has come from different local zones. And so, yeah, the
Exactly.
membranics of the borders of the ecosystems are probably crucial there. And so maybe that's where we should try to set up some of our spiritual hubs and intentional
That's
communities.
so what you just said, okay, a couple things. The last thing you just said was what I was thinking about, like Center for Process Studies type stuff. Like ecotourism is a huge thing anyhow. Like why aren't there, like it's cool that stuff's in China and everywhere else. I think that's great and important, but like imagine if you had a bunch of these centers on like one by the beach, one by the forest, like I said, like these different places, the mountain, whatever, right? Where, or the desert one, it's like all these things where that you put, you're already in the liminal space, so you're primed in some way for it, right? For like openness and novelty. And then having stuff like, it might sound a little bit new age or utopian, but like even like the yoga stuff, back to that, like I think there's something about the somatic piece
Hmm.
that's also important, that's lost in philosophical, of course, discussion only, uh that can like open you up maybe emotionally even more to novelty, right?
Yep.
Hearing about other religions. So I
Hmm.
think all that's great. Like when you mentioned, oh, the Desert Fathers, and then I thought about like Tibetan monk, like and then you mentioned, of course, like a shaman in the forest. Like it's all very unique, right?
Yep. Yep. Hmm.
Forms of experience and practice, but they all are super valuable
Hmm.
and they can be recreated to an extent. Like you could have an immersive environment, even if it's virtual elements to some extent. I think that's better than nothing. Um, you know, to your last point about like setting up centers
Hmm.
around those regions. Because like a membrane, right? Like the whole idea of boundaries and membranes is like they need to be permeable.
Hmm. Yep.
Like
Yep.
if you have a membrane that is not permeable at all, and it's death eventually, I'm sure there's no nutrients or
Yep.
information being exchanged. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
um,
If it's too open, though, then it's no longer information processing in a coherent sort of way, and now yeah, it's just chaotic, and you're not, yeah, able to, yeah, constitute discrete individuals through that membrane. So it's a delicate balance for sure.
yeah, and like if you're too far off the membrane, I guess let's call it that way. You're too much in the center. You might not be like reaping the benefits or really getting like that rich exchange that occurs like on the boundary zones. So I think all this stuff does like tie in, I mean,
Yeah.
really.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um,
Definitely. Yeah, if anyone wants to give the Center for Process Studies a handful of millions of dollars to set up liminal eco spirituality centers so we can, yeah, build our ecological civilization, we're all ears. So,
we're looking for $100 million, yeah,
yeah.
fundraiser campaign for
Hmm.
10 places or whatever, all the different biomes. Like
Hmm.
that's more than 10, I guess. But yeah, that would be kind of cool though.
That'd be great. Yeah. Love it.
I'd go. I'd go.
I'd go. No. Very cool.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
man,
Yeah.
this has been a really good talk. I'm
Absolutely.
had a good time.
Likewise. Yeah, thanks for coming on. I'm sure there's definitely more we could have gotten into, so let's leave the door open to chat more in the future. And yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much for having me, man.